Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. My intention with all of these videos is the highest levels of love, light, and unity consciousness. And so we're going to go into a little bit of flow, just kind of let my higher consciousness come through and see what we have to tune into today. And maybe do a little energy update as well, but we'll see. So. And so as we move into these new days ahead, we will find a variety of reasons not to tune in to our bodies, not to tune into our higher consciousness, and instead just to tune into our head. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. Let us stay in this flow for a moment and allow this momentary combustion that many of us are feeling, this intuitive time travel, we might call it. For many of us are feeling into the future and feel bright. I'm seeing our future's so bright, I gotta wear shades, that song. And yet at the same time, we are seeing catastrophe all around us. And let us play for a moment with that word, because in the moments of catastrophe is rebirth. We come into a moment out of atrophy and we move into movement. And so while many things are in the process of falling apart from one perspective, old regimes that fall and others that are trying to come up into the collective or utilize the collective to be built, there are also those that are within the collective that are building their own molecular infrastructure, play on words, for we are each embodying our own variation of creations. And as we do this, we come together in utilization of the energies that are pulling up, if you will, from the earth, and those that we are pulling down from one perspective, from all that is around us. And it allows us to rebirth or to birth or to feel into this new movement of reunification with a higher structure, a higher sound, a higher vibration, that which we are each intuitively connected into, whether we realize it, recognize it, bring it into our realization or not. And so there are those of us that are connected intrinsically into this new reality structure, or remembering from another perspective, this inner innate structure that is restructuring itself or evolving, as some might call it. And through this revolution, evolution, revealing in evolution, we actually create more of a co-aesthetic, there's a play on words, co-aesthetic, I'm playing with this, reality, energetic restructuring. And so we begin to feel one reality while we are seeing a different reality. And we'll play with this for a moment. For some are feeling this deeper resonance while seeing the dissonance all around us. And so it can be very confusing at times. And this is what we were speaking of in the beginning in regards to confusion or being pulled in a variety of directions. And I'm being called to stop for a moment. And I'm going to give an example and then I'll go back into it. So for example, I was feeling very motivated, feeling very highly energized by what I was writing about and creating and conversing with in some of my beautiful conversations with other humans and starseeds. And then the news came on. Now, I don't generally turn the news on. My husband likes to watch the news. And usually I would turn away or just go do something else, not to ignore it, but just so that I don't change my vibration into a lower vibration. But there were some interesting things, and I found myself being pulled in that, my attention was pulled there. And I realized I already know this stuff. I'm already aware that we have extraterrestrial brothers and sisters. This is like an echo, a delay of something that many of us have known about for a very long time. And then one of the other subject matters was about being censored. Well, we've already known that this has been going on for quite some time. And so I was interested in what the new presentation knew of what this looks like. And it was messy and it was kind of silly and frustrating. And I found myself remembering why I don't watch the news very frequently. But I also found myself feeling compassion for the people I was tuning into and appreciation for the fact that they're trying to make sense of these things with much more of a linear perspective. And boy, that must be really even more challenging. And it gave me an opportunity to better understand my fellow brothers and sisters and perhaps where they were coming from. Now, having said that, it also made me very aware that that could become an easy distraction because it changed it. I realized, wow, even though I feel like we've come a long way in some aspects, it doesn't feel like we've gotten really anywhere at all. So I had all these thoughts come up and I realized this is where it's important to stay on task and not to be pulled off course and follow these distractions, because sometimes that's just all they are. I felt a sense of recognizing that if I tuned into this on a regular basis, I would feel like we weren't going anywhere. But what I feel below that, because it looks like that. I mean, it looks like we're making progress, but anyways, from one perspective, if you have no clue as to what's going on, then it feels like progress is being made, or it feels like things are happening that maybe are not something that we're used to, so it seems new. From another perspective, it's not new. It's all old news, just being brought up now. So for some people that could be exciting, for other people it's disturbing, and for some people it's confusing. And overall, I had compassion for all of that. So that was the positive thing. And I also recognized that it would create a sense of, I could see it creating a sense of hopelessness at times, going, wow, where is this going? But ultimately, what we're being shown where it's going is not what I feel. Intuitively, I feel that there's a lot of incredibly powerful shifts going on that aren't necessarily being talked about. So let's get back into flow. So we are each being called to redirect our energy and redirect in a constant reflection and understanding of direction. So feeling into our own innate inner support system. For each of us must tune in order to tune out. And this is a play on words, for we are not suggesting that we tune out of reality and only focus on tuning within. I'm seeing like sitting in a cave and ignoring everything. But we must fine-tune our instrument in order to receive the information that is being offered at our fingertips. We must tune in daily, and in some cases, hour by hour, in this timed reflection, to see what is being reflected back to us, to show us where it is that we can focus our attention in a much better pattern, in a much better frequency, on a more regular pattern, creating a habit pattern that outplays the old habits. For many of us are having difficulty, for we are playing out old habits, not understanding why we are not getting ahead, because we are constantly tuning back into our head, which is what our analytical look over here, look over there system teaches us. And so we have been trained, I'm seeing Pavlov's dogs, trained over and over again, hour by hour, to tune in to anywhere but within. And while this seems so simple, we also would venture to say it is not easy if we are not in the habit of making this our intention, making this our regular reflection, making this our daily excursion. And this is a play on words. I'm seeing even when we go like an excursion, going out, but we're going within, then going out. So we're going within as we go for a walk. We might be tuning into what we feel what we're sensing, what we're hearing, and not necessarily just being tuned into, let's say, the news. You know, we're not walking and always listening to a podcast, but if we are listening to a podcast, maybe it's something that helps us to better tune into breathing or intuition or possible, even some scientific information can, like on the brain or the body or something that we're learning that makes us go, aha. Hearing things that make you go, what's that song? So we're tuning in. I know I was way off key there, but we're tuning into things that make us, the word that keeps coming through over and over again in this particular transmission is reflection, and giving us a moment to feel what that feels like. So as we do this and we utilize our senses, we come out of the habit of just using one or two senses. And we also learn how to balance being overwhelmed by all of the senses. And we move into our inner sensations, play on words. Some light language coming through. So our sense of direction is then lit by our inner landscape, our ability to feel into what needs to be trimmed, trimming the fat, what needs to be maintained, what can be planted and watered, and what needs to be fed. And so this inner landscaping allows us to recognize what it is that we are trying to escape, what it is that we are escaping or running away from. It gives us a sense of, I'm seeing like a bonsai tree, and I'm seeing like, you know, when you have that sand, those little sand kits, and you rake the sand, it just allows you to just drop in and feel. And I'm also seeing the left and right brains of the hemispheres of the brains tuning into each other. One was over here. I'm seeing one eyeball's over here, one eyeball's over there. And we're able to then come together and merge. And then I'm seeing cross-eyed without us crossing our wires and getting really confused. It just allows us to stabilize a bit and recognize what's out of alignment and out of tune. We become more in tune and in touch with our own innerscape. And this allows us to understand and relate to all aspects of what it is that we are seeking to relate to. And this is play on words as well. For many of us feel that we cannot relate to many aspects right now that we are seeing show up in our reality, whether it be a friend or family member or a particular subject that we feel subjugated to listen to or to participate in. So as we allow ourselves to recognize that we are creating these subjects from one perspective, it allows us to be more subjective and objective about what it is that we are focusing on and sending our attention to. And we've said this many times before, as have many different people who play in this way, that where we send our attention, our energy, is exactly what shows up for us in the collective from one perspective. So we are more, I'm seeing so many different angles. So, and just as I am taking a breath to rein it back in, to bring me back into the space of centeredness, it allows me to see different influxes or pieces of information that are being given to me all at one time. And this allows me to then interpret those different signals and see what it is that they are signifying, signal firing, where they are coming from, how they feel. And it allows me to utilize each of those at different points or points of reflection. And so it allows me to then create from a multitude of pieces of information and a multidimensional way of communication that allows me to enhance my signature. It allows me to enhance and create from a multifaceted point of view or many different perspectives that allow me to assimilate the information that comes in a new way. And so we are all receiving this in our own way. And so we are sharing this from a perspective of going back within to figure out. I'm seeing figure 8. So going within to figure out, right? To create figures from where we are creating within. This allows us to enhance our communication. It allows us to better interpret the information that is stored within and the information that we are receiving. And I'm hearing from many different directions. And we are then able to assimilate those patterns or frequencies in a much more organized fashion. And this takes practice, for at times this information can be distorted based on where our frequency or patterns are communicating from, interpreting from, perceiving from. And so when we recognize that we are in a particular distorted frequency pattern, meaning scattered and perhaps fearful or in a place of, I'm hearing irregularity. I'm just seeing that, if we're in a really heavy place, that information that's coming in, and I'm being called to share an example. So when I went down the rabbit hole of the truther community back in 2019, maybe, or whatever year it was, I was having dreams that were essentially then, I was tuning into the collective dream time. And the collective dream time was allowing me to perceive all of these different variations of reality that were then reflected back to me by other intuitives or channels that were also tuning into those braids or planes of existence or stories or timelines, all of the above. What happened was, because I was seeing it and it made me, I was already in a place of, well, we could say discomfort and fear at what I was witnessing, but I wasn't able to necessarily interpret it from a higher perspective. So in my interpretation, I was seeing that one layer. I had to really sit with that and organize it and work into my heart space in order to integrate that energy so that I could then process it and share it from a higher perspective and not from a place of fear. And I'm also being shown, oh, Koi, this is another subject, but I'm going to touch briefly on it because this has come up in session recently and in a conversation I had with a loved one. And that is, there's a lot of information that's being thrown at us from people who are prophetic in nature or present that. They come into a presentation, I'm a channel, I'm a light worker, whatever that is. And this is no judgment, but the question I'm always guided to ask if I'm working with someone or myself, even if I'm tuning into that information, is where is this person's vibration? And how broad, how much can they feel and see? Because we always have a filtration system, right? So I use an example. We can have a download or a piece of information, and then we might attach one particular meaning to that piece of information. And then it is sent out into the internet and people listen and tune in, and then they end up interpreting that information or believing it, right? So then that energy is added to that particular interpretation of that reality. So I'm going to give an example of, gosh, I could use so many examples, but not all the information that we're hearing is completely wrong or completely right. If you take, it's like having a dream. I'll start with that. You have a dream, and you have a dream, let's say, about a panther that is chasing us through the forest, and then that panther instead goes after, I could go into some. Bottom line is, just because I have a dream about a panther doesn't mean that I can interpret it that the Panthers are going to win in the sports match. Football? So I could say I had a dream that the Panthers were conquering the jungle, and that could mean that the Panthers are going to win. That might be true, but that doesn't mean that's the only meaning. And that is also based on so as soon as I turn that into an interpretation, without really following through, I'm using my analytical left brain to interpret that information, which we all do, and that's part of our toolbox. Yet we're being called not to get hung up on that one particular interpretation, because there's a lot of different variations. And so this has to do, you guys, with what we're hearing on the news. This has to do what we're listening to on social media, all of it. And I know I went on to 5 different subjects there, but that's how this works. Okay. So as we utilize our own intuitive resources, we must again and again come back to our center so that we can interpret the information and also be open to the interpretation that we are receiving, recognizing that some of it is a direct reflection of what we are feeling inside or what it is that we are tuning into. So this is something that will continue to be a process as we begin to navigate in these new times. For within these new times are enhanced human sensations and enhanced human, we could call them, I'm seeing like gifts. So when we turn these gifts on, that isn't necessarily the end all be all know all. There might be like, what dimension are we tuning into would be another way of looking at it. What timeline are we looking at? When our intuition comes on, if we're in a lower based frequency, we might only be seeing things through that lower based frequency filtration system. Just because somebody is an intuitive or our intuition comes on doesn't mean that we're in our hearts. And just because we're in our hearts doesn't mean that we're there holding that frequency on a regular basis or with consistency is what I'm hearing. And I think I did a video on that a while ago, but talking about how important it is to be consistent with our inner work, which is heart frequency, breathing, grounding, letting go, trusting, meditation, doing things that bring us joy. So as we work to perfect these gifts, we may find that there are many imperfections that come up, that are coming up through this particular time or journey in our lives. And yet we would remind you that from a higher perspective, all is perfection. And so this is merely an experience that we are each intuitively I'm just seeing a spiral. We're all woven in this experience. And so each person will have a different experience from these waves that are coming in. And so let us talk about that for a moment. I'm shifting direction. These waves that are coming in are encapsulated within a circuitry pattern. This circuitry pattern allows for a density to be felt and to essentially be plowed through. And this is a play on words. We are essentially cleaning up, one might say, the lower density programs. And as we clean up this lower density program, we are simultaneously pulling up from the earth the higher chains, frequencies, and connection points that are essentially turning on our own human potential. They are essentially connecting, again, connecting the dots, creating new patterns, and we are cleaning out old programs that have been stored in the body. We might call this a mainframe swipe or sweep, chimney sweep, a clean sweep. And as we clean up this residue, this residual compacted chain, I'm seeing like a ball and chain, it creates an influx of many different, I'm trying to describe what I'm seeing, but I'm seeing this swirl of energy. And so we're getting or receiving the help when we connect to the earth. And so we may feel certain things in the body shift. We may feel certain things in the brain shift, certain things click into place, and other things that we felt we needed to focus on lose their consistency. They lose their import. So that's play on words. They are no longer important for us to tune into. And so as we recognize that the earth is reconfiguring her own stream, we are doing this together. And so we manifest in the physical much of what has been shukuye niki maeti shi ne koyeti ahak unishik imak uishia ini anikipu oshine. All right, so I'm seeing a couple things. Number one, I'm seeing things happen and manifest in the physical and then be gone. Getting goosebumps. So like we'll see something come up and it shows up in our reality, or we see it playing out on the news or whatever it might be in the collective, and then all of a sudden it's not there one day, like it didn't even exist. And so I can see people like, am I losing my mind? Didn't that just... And that's what's happening. It's almost like there's stuff that's been held in the earth that as a collective we wanted or chose, whether it be directly or indirectly, to create. And so this is my own perspective, you guys. This is my own way of interpreting it. So this is just one variation. And so it almost has to be created. It doesn't have to be, but for whatever reason, it had enough juice behind it to show up at some point. So a lot of that stuff is showing up. But it doesn't mean that it's going to hold weight. It doesn't mean that it's going to last. And so rather than getting caught up in that, I'm hearing allow it to pass. This too shall pass through. It's almost like it's being worked out of the system. So I'm being shown energy cysts in the earth, just like in our energy cysts in our body. We have an energy cyst. It was stuck there because we had an accident. We had pain and fear and frustration around that particular injury, and it was held in our body, let's say in our shoulder. We're working it out. We're doing the body work. We're doing the inner work. We're working with the earth, which is a body, which holds energy. So we're simultaneously, as we work on ourselves, she's like, okay, this is ready to be released. They can handle it. Or we're working together now. We can work together on pulling this up, sending it where it needs to go. And simultaneously, while we do that, we're also bringing up codes that have also been held in the earth that are encapsulated within the earth. So what I'm being shown is, let's say it's an energy cyst, and I'm referring a little bit to cranial sacral therapy. So what happens is, if you've ever had it done, or you're a body worker or an energy worker, sometimes you'll do this energy work and it'll feel really uncomfortable, or we'll have visions. I've had visions of past lives. I've had visions of this lifetime, memories I didn't even realize were important. And all of a sudden it comes up and we have like a burp, or we want to dry heave. It's like our body's like, oh, I got to get rid of this. It's uncomfortable. And all of a sudden, and because that energy moved up and out, we're now feeling what's underneath that, which is new things. It's like the sponge now has opened and we can receive more. That is also connected to the earth. So this is just my own interpretation of what I'm seeing. And so as this comes up, we are able to simultaneously cleanse while weaving in the new frequencies. And these new frequencies then allow us to create the new reality simultaneously with the old as it processes itself out. And I'm hearing we're out processing. And this is challenging. And yet that is why we are here now from one perspective, for we are co-creating in this way. And this is why it is so important to play. While all of these difficulties and energy cysts, as I was referring to earlier, are being shown, the wounds are being opened, the potentials that held charge are being reviewed, are being cleared, and are being seen, we then move them out so that we can get a clearer view of what was held in between, of what has been held inside of this greater composition of, I'm hearing a sound bath. Ooh, the whole back of my skull is going, wah, wah. So while this message seems like we are speaking about what is happening on the earth and in the collective timeline variations, it is also happening in the human body. For within the human body, memory is stored within the water, within the matter, within the cells, and each of these is intrinsically interwoven and connected to the matter of the earth, the cells, and all that we are. I'm hearing the compilation. We're a composition of many different elements, chemicals. And so when one massive movement occurs in the chemical elemental composition of the earth, the human feels it, for it is a simultaneous upgrade. I'm going to end on that note. So that was a lot. So thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, you guys, just to share a little energy update before I sign out. What happens is we might need to just, I had to lay on the ground the other day for about an hour and just stay there. I've been doing a lot more movement. If you guys haven't checked out my Instagram channel, I've been doing, I posted on YouTube as well, but I've been doing a lot more intuitive movement, and I'm not the only one doing this, you guys. I can't remember who shared that comment, but thank you so much. Somebody was talking about, I do the same thing. I don't always read the comments. I do my best to keep up, but not that I have a lot of comments, probably because I don't read them and I don't respond as often. But you're sharing that with each other, and that's even more important, right? So it's recognizing that we're all doing our own stuff. Some people have been called to do grid work in different areas. Some people have been called to really work with water. It's like these are our own innate signals that are coming up, and our intuition is saying, go here, look at this. Rather than what we're being told to pay attention to, we're intuitively feeling it. And then we're trusting that we are going in the right direction. We're trusting that something is happening for our greater expansion. And we can only trust, as I've mentioned, I think in a previous video, we can only trust when we practice, when we are recognizing what the outside influences are versus the inner influences. And I also am being called to play with that. I'm seeing like, the flow, the inner flow versus the outer flow. Outer influence versus inner influence. Like I'm just seeing, kind of playing with this a little bit. And then it becomes easier to navigate between the two, because that's the other message. It's like we are navigating between the two from another perspective, many of us. Some have chosen to just hold that higher frequency and be in a place of constant grid work. Other people are choosing to stay maybe in a fourth dimensional, third dimensional, shadow eating, true, it doesn't matter. And some are oscillating. We're all doing this in our own way. So honoring that process, because we're each navigating and where we are, it's just different for everyone. So in love and light, namaste.